Hello, Namaskar. This is First Post and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. I waited for months to say this. It's good to be back and exhilarating to see your response. Thank you. We're calling the show Vantage because we see ourselves at a vantage point. India is leading the G20. It is championing the cause of the global South, and we in the media should be able to complement that, to reflect the hopes and aspirations of an India that is in the lead, to reflect the sentiment of a young India that is confident about its place in the world and not shy of making its point, not shy of taking on the world. We hope you like what we put together for you, and we hope you'll join us on this journey as we try to reclaim our stories. We'll be experimenting a lot on this show, and we look forward to your feedback. Please be kind and patient. In all humility, we promise you a show like no other. Today is Vasant Panchami. It marks the arrival of spring in India. It is also the country's 74th Republic Day. We say, what better day for a new beginning? Tonight on the show, we'll tell you how ancient India had constitutions, democracies and republics, even though we tend to think of these concepts as Western imports. And talking about the West, our neighbor in this direction, Pakistan, may be on the verge of another breakup. We'll tell you how. Also, a Republic Day gift from India for the BBC, a story you don't want to miss. Let's start with the headlines. India celebrated its 74th Republic Day today with a grand spectacle. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi was the chief guest. An army contingent from Egypt led the march. Russia fires multiple missiles. Ukraine says it has shot them down, but confirms a major explosion in the capital city of Kiev. The war economy is booming. US arms sales shot up in 2022 due to the Russia-Ukraine war, a 49% jump, crossing $51 billion. Donald Trump is back. Facebook and Instagram reinstate the former president after 2 years. He was banned for the 2021 Capitol riots. And the Earth's inner core may have stopped spinning. And that's not all. It could now go in the reverse direction. These are the findings of a new study. Our lead story is from India, and how could it not be? India is celebrating its Republic Day today, its 74th, like I just told you. On this day in 1950, the Indian Constitution came into force. Every year it is celebrated with a grand parade. It showcases India's strength, its military strength, its cultural strength, its diversity. We'll start with what's different this time. This Republic Day had many firsts, starting with the location. The parade took place on Kartavya Path in New Delhi. Kartavya Path means the path of duty. This is a revamped ceremonial boulevard. Prime Minister Modi unveiled it last year, and it marks a major turning point for India. You see, this stretch of the road in the heart of New Delhi was initially called Kingsway. After independence, it came to be known as Rajpath, a literal translation of Kingsway and a symbol of colonial rule. Now, with this shift to Kartavya Path, India is shedding baggage from the past. Another first. Russian tanks were not part of this parade. It has never happened before because Russia has been a key source of our weapons. So that's what we showcase. But this time, Indian weapons were on display, like the Akash missile system, the BrahMos missile, the 105 field guns, the K9 Vajra howitzers, the Nag anti-tank guided missiles, the main battle tank Arjun, and quick reaction fighting vehicles. All of this defense equipment is made in India. Another first, the participation of Agniveers. 6 of them took part in the parade this year. Who are the Agniveers? They're part of Agnipath, a new military recruitment scheme. Under the scheme, around 45,000 soldiers will be recruited every year. They will serve in the armed forces for 4 years. After that period, 75% of them will leave, 25% will be retained and given permanent commission. Then we come to the Rafale aircraft. They were part of the parade, although not for the first time. A quarter of the fleet, 9 aircraft in total, took to the skies today. And of course, the Tableaus. There were 23 this year. 17 from states and union territories and 6 from various ministries of the Indian government. They covered key themes, 3 key themes: the cultural heritage of India, India's economic progress, and national security. And the centerpiece was the one from Haryana, with scenes from the Mahabharata. It featured Lord Krishna in his Virat Swaroop, or universal form. And it's an interesting addition because our strategic culture draws heavily from the Mahabharata. We believe in dialogue, show patience, do not start a war, but when the need arises, use the Sudarshan Chakra. In fact, tonight I want to tell you a story. Once upon a time, there was a king. Yes, it's that kind of a story. The king was called Raja Bhoj. He found a throne that belonged to King Vikramaditya. It was made of gold with 32 wooden statues. The king, Raja Bhoj, wanted to sit on the throne, but he couldn't. Every time he tried, a statue came to life. One of those 32 statues, it came to life, and it stopped the king from sitting. The statue then asked him to listen to a story of the glory of King Vikramaditya. Every time there was a different story, but every story ended with the same question: are you worthy enough to sit on the throne of the great King Vikramaditya? And every time Raja Bhoj had the same answer: no, I'm not worthy of sitting on this throne. This happened repeatedly. The statues were impressed, they liked the humility of Raja Bhoj, so they blessed him. They let him sit on the throne of King Vikramaditya. This is a fable from the 11th century. It is called Singhasan Battisi. Singhasan means throne, Battis is 32. The title means 32 Tales of the Throne. And this wasn't just a storybook. This was a book of guidelines, a book of laws, if you like. Why am I telling you about this today? Because as we celebrate our Republic Day, the day our Constitution came into force, it is important to know that books of laws or constitutions existed in ancient India. And while we may think that a constitution or a republic is a modern construct, a modern concept imported from the West, something like this existed in ancient India. Our history, in fact, is full of such stories and texts. Centuries ago, the concept of democracy existed in India. Prime Minister Modi has called India the mother of democracies.
भारत मदर ऑफ डेमोक्रेसी है और हमने भी और बिहार वासियों ने तो खास दुनिया में डंका बजाते रहना चाहिए कि वी आर अ मदर ऑफ डेमोक्रेसी.
Today, as we celebrate modern India's 74th Republic Day, I want to talk about books of laws and constitutions from our ancient past, as far back as the Vedic period. They had institutions like central assemblies to check the powers of the king. Books like the Rig Veda and Chandogya Upanishad talk about them. These assemblies had 2 houses, the Samiti representing the whole tribe and the Sabha with distinguished members, a bit like the upper and lower houses of parliament today. The Mahabharata refers to Ganaraja, meaning the rule of the republic. Now, we usually think of Greece as the birthplace of modern democracy, but even Greek records talk about republics in ancient India. Greek historian Diodorus Siculus has a very interesting account. He wrote about Alexander's invasion of India, 326 BC. Siculus said northwest India had republics that challenged Alexander's army. Perhaps the oldest book of laws in India is the Arthashastra, believed to have been written in the 4th century BC. The author was Kautilya, also known as Chanakya. He wrote about all aspects of governance and defined the 7 elements of a state. Then there was the Dharma Shastra, written around 600 BC, according to some accounts. It talks about the 4 different stages of a lawsuit. You file a complaint, the defendant responds, the jury deliberates, and finally the judge speaks, a lot like a modern-day court hearing. India was practicing all of this centuries ago. Then we have the Brihaspati Smriti. It talks about the hierarchy of courts, amazingly similar to modern-day legal systems. At the lowest level was the family arbitrator. Stage 2, a court with a judge. Stage 3, the court with the chief justice. And right at the top, the king's court. And the king was not the sole decision maker. He had counselors and judges. Their role is best described by Katyayana, a Sanskrit scholar, mathematician, and priest. This is what he said: if the king wants to inflict upon the litigants an illegal or unrighteous decision, it is the duty of the judge to warn the king and prevent him. When the judge realizes that the king has deviated from equity and justice, his duty is not to please the king. For this is no occasion for soft speech. If the judge fails in his duty, he is guilty. All of this was practiced in India ages ago. In the centuries that followed, India was colonized. And after it won freedom, it wrote a new book of laws, a constitution. The year was 1949, and it was nothing short of a miracle. For a country as diverse as ours, with 88% of the population illiterate, it was a very big deal to write a constitution, and that too, the world's largest, 145,000 words. For perspective, the US Constitution has 4,400 words. The Indian one has 1,45,000. And this was just the first version. It has been amended 100 times. It has grown bigger each time. The book is divided into articles and schedules. Articles spell out a law. Schedules give supplementary information, a bit like an appendix in a book. So why is our law book so big? Because we have a big, diverse country.
Our difficulty is how to make the heterogeneous mess that we have today take a decision in common and march in a cooperative way on that road which is bound to lead us to unity.
This was B.R. Ambedkar addressing the Constituent Assembly. What is the Constituent Assembly? The people who drafted the Constitution. And let me say this again, this was an extraordinary experiment. Today, diversity is a corporate buzzword. India aced it more than 70 years ago. This group that wrote the Constitution had 389 members from all parts of India. Then partition happened. Some went to Pakistan. 299 were left. They took 3 years to write the book. The original copies were not typed or printed. They were handwritten by a calligrapher called Prem Bihari Narayan Raizada. He wrote in English and Hindi, and he did it for free. What he wanted was his place in history. He wanted his name on each page of India's Constitution and his grandfather's name on the last page. The book he created was a piece of art. The pages were bound in black leather, embossed with patterns of gold. Each page was decorated by artists from Shanti Niketan, led by a man called Nandlal Bose. They depicted stories from Indian history, like the Indus Valley civilization, the struggle for independence, the Vedic period, a scene from the Mahabharata showing a discussion between Arjuna and Lord Krishna. The section on fundamental rights has a sketch of Lord Ram, Sita and Lakshman returning from the Battle of Lanka. All of this is in our Constitution. It features Emperor Ashok talking about Buddhism, Lakshmi Bai, Akbar, Maratha ruler Shivaji, and Guru Gobind Singh, the 10th Sikh Guru. The laws in the book came from different sources, from at least 10 different countries. Principles like single citizenship, the cabinet, parliamentary system, they came from Britain. Fundamental rights, impeachment, independent judiciary came from the US. Concurrent list from Australia, directive principles from Ireland, federalism from Canada, fundamental duties from Russia, then USSR, and concepts of liberty, equality, and fraternity came from France. Imagine undertaking a task like this, curating ideas from around the globe, tailoring them to the needs of India, and building consensus in such a diverse group. I say it again, it was a miracle of sorts. 7 decades have passed, the world has changed, India has changed, it has made long strides. Today our constitution is criticized for its length and for how complicated the text is. Well, some criticisms are valid, but when you look at the context, how this text came into being and how it stood the test of time, you're awed by the story of this book. And when you rewind further, you realize that our present constitution is not our first. We've had books of laws and republics and democratic institutions long before we started looking west for inspiration. Lots of food for thought for a Thursday. Let me take you back to the Republic Day parade. Like I said, it showcases India's strength, military, cultural, civilizational. And in line with this, Nari Shakti, or the power of women, was on full display today. Again, it was a day of firsts. Here's a report. A 21-gun salute by the indigenous 105mm Indian field guns welcomed President Draupadi Murmu as she arrived at the Kartavya Path along with Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Egypt's President and Chief Guest Abdel Fattah al-Sisi.
Safe and secure.
These made-in-India guns replace the Army's 25-pounder guns from the British era, which have been used so far for the ceremonial gun salute.
परेड का हिस्सा बन रही हैं। ये
For the first time ever, women constables featured in the Border Security Force's camel band, which has been a part of Republic Day celebrations since 1976. 12 Mahila Praharis from Gujarat, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra made their debut. President Draupadi Murmu took a salute from an all-women contingent of the Central Reserve Police Force, the CRPF, India's largest paramilitary force with over 3 lakh personnel in its ranks. This was part of the Modi government's Nari Shakti or Women Empowerment theme for this year's Republic Day.
The motto of the CRPF.
A women air crew of Dornier aircraft was part of the Indian Navy tableau, putting the spotlight on an all-women crew surveillance sortie, which was undertaken last year. "29-year-old Lieutenant Commander Disha Amrit, a naval air operations officer, led the Navy's marching contingent.
नौसेना का मार्चिंग कंटिंजेंट लेफ्टिनेंट कमांडर दिशा अमृत के नेतृत्व में
And now, following our guest contingent.
And the parade
first
started with this.
contingent serving active horse cavalry regiment in the world.
The first contingent in the uniform of the 61st Cavalry, led by Captain Raizada Shaurya Bali. The 61st Cavalry Regiment is one of the largest and one of the last operational unmechanized horse-mounted cavalry units in the world. So that was the parade. Now let's talk about the chief guest. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the first leader from Egypt ever to grace this occasion. Why was he invited as a chief guest? How is the chief guest chosen? And why is this one significant? In the next few minutes, we'll discuss, first of all, why the Egyptian president? Well, for multiple reasons. The most obvious one is to deepen ties. Last year, Egypt and India celebrated 75 years of diplomatic relations. Egypt is one of India's oldest friends. It recognized India's independence within 3 days. India, as you would know, became independent on the 15th of August 1947, and Egypt recognized India on the 18th. Both countries are founding members of NAM, the Non-Aligned Movement. That period was the heyday. The friendship between Nehru and Nasser is legendary. But after that, India and Egypt drifted apart. Now Prime Minister Modi and President Sisi are attempting a revival. During this visit, India and Egypt have elevated their ties. Both countries are now strategic partners. And the case for deepening ties with Egypt is a compelling one. Egypt links Africa and West Asia, so it is an important trade gateway. The Suez Canal in Egypt is a major transit hub for Indian cargo. Beyond trade, there is defense. Egypt's military is the biggest in the region. Both sides are stepping up bilateral military drills. And Cairo has shown interest in Indian arms like the Tejas fighter jets, the Dhruv light attack helicopters, even the BrahMos missile. This year's Republic Day featured the Egyptian Armed Forces. The contingent had 180 personnel. President Sisi himself is a military man. He retired as a general in 2014. He's also held key defense portfolios. He served as the defense minister and as director of military intelligence. So defense cooperation is going to be important. But there is strategic convergence too. India is expanding its ties in West Asia. Prime Minister Modi has put his weight behind this project, and Egypt, with its growing profile in the region, will be a key partner. Last year, both sides added a new dimension to this partnership: food security. India is now a key supplier of wheat to Egypt. Last year, Cairo lifted an old tax barrier. The war in Ukraine threatened Egypt's food security. Supplies were disrupted, and India was quick to help. Long story short, there's a lot going for this partnership, and that explains why President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is the chief guest. Now to the second question. How do we pick a Republic Day chief guest? The process is elaborate. It begins at least 6 months before the event. India's Ministry of External Affairs prepares the list of potential invitees. The names are cleared at the highest level by Prime Minister and the President of India. But why a list? Why not just choose a name? Because of availability. A potential chief guest could have a packed schedule. They may not be able to turn up. When the list is ready, Indian ambassadors abroad begin their work. They make inquiries, and once they have a confirmation, New Delhi announces the name of the chief guest. That is the procedure. In terms of protocol, it is the highest honor extended by India to a foreign leader to be invited as a Republic Day chief guest. It is the ultimate sign of friendship with India. And in the last few decades, several world leaders have graced this occasion. Our next report recaps some of the prominent names. Talking about the West, our neighbor in this direction was once a part of India. Pakistan celebrated its first Independence Day one day before India, August 14, 1947. But it took a full 9 years to write a constitution. Pakistan became a republic only in the year 1956. And now, in 2023, Pakistan is struggling to keep the lights on. This week, the entire country was plunged into darkness. This is what it looked like. This was Pakistan's biggest outage ever. Its national grid failed. 220 million people were without electricity, many of them also without food. There is an acute shortage of food, plus they're running out of cash. Reports say Pakistan has money to cover just 3 weeks of imports, and the security situation is worsening by the day, so much so that Pakistan could now break up. This is not an exaggeration. We have facts to back this up. Since its birth, Pakistan has been broken once. That was in 1971 when Bangladesh declared independence. And now 50 years later, Pakistan seems to be on the verge of yet another breakup. In December, the Pakistani parliament was in session and a lawmaker's statement summed up the crisis.
वहां पर दहशतगर्दों ने कब्जा कर लिया है. जिन जिन लोगों ने भी उस काबुल के टेक ओवर को सेलिब्रेट किया है, आज हमारे वो मुजरिम है. जिन जिन लोगों ने भी फैसिलिटेट किया, जिन जिन फौजी जर्नलों ने इस चीज को फैसिलिटेट किया, उन सबको भी हमें कटहरे में खड़ा करना होगा.
Khyber Pakhtunkhwa was captured by terrorists. This is a province of Pakistan, the northwestern province, also the country's smallest. Last month, Pakistan's interior minister also spoke about this. Rana Sanaullah said, thousands of terrorists are in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. 7 to 10,000, he said. They belong to the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, the TTP, a group birthed by the ISI, Pakistan's infamous spy agency. The TTP was a fallout of the ISI's activities in Afghanistan. The Pakistani military backed the Taliban. They helped the Taliban come back to power, and now those chickens are coming home to roost. The same Taliban terrorists are haunting Pakistan's military. They have become Pakistan's biggest security challenge, so much so that there's talk of Pakistan breaking up further. Let me show you a video. It's a propaganda video released by the TTP, the Pakistani Taliban, if you will. What do you think was happening here? Those were snipers from the Pakistani Taliban. They were attacking Pakistani soldiers. They have invaded Pakistani territory, openly attacking the military and then releasing propaganda videos about it. Why is this a big deal? To understand that, we must first understand who and what this group is. The Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan is an umbrella organization of terrorist groups, 3 in particular: the Taliban in Afghanistan, the Al-Qaeda, and the Islamic State Khorasan, or ISIS-K. The TTP was formed in the year 2007 by a man called Baitullah Masood, the one said to be behind the assassination of Benazir Bhutto, former Pakistani Prime Minister. She was killed in 2007. Back then, the group had spelled out 3 goals for itself: enforce Sharia law in Pakistan, support the Taliban in Afghanistan, and conduct a jihad against Pakistan's security forces. 3 goals. But in the years that followed, this group was divided and weakened. In 2020, it came together again. This is an assessment of the United Nations. It believes the TTP has strongholds on both sides of the Afghanistan-Pakistan border, and it boasts of several thousand fighters now. Experts say the Taliban continues to provide a safe haven to this group. The TTP is now challenging Pakistan's sovereignty. It is attacking the military. Pakistan has lost a high number of security personnel to such deadly attacks. And I have some figures, some numbers. In 2021, 270 Pakistani security personnel were killed. Last year, in 2022, 282 lives were lost. In 2020, this number stood at 163. The casualty figure has shot up, as you can see, and this is courtesy the Taliban. Most of these attacks were reported from 2 regions, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Balochistan. A few months ago, the TTP stepped up its campaign. In November, they unilaterally ended a ceasefire and issued orders to their fighters. They were told to carry out attacks across Pakistan. In December, the TTP stormed a police station in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. At least 13 people inside were taken hostage, and reports say there were 33 hostage takers. The Pakistani security forces had to launch a major operation to flush out the hostage takers, but their masters are still at large, posing a threat and plotting Pakistan's breakup. In fact, reports say the TTP has announced its own government for northern Pakistan. A statement was published in the Khorasan Diary. It is said to be the mouthpiece of the TTP. The group has announced a cabinet. It has also appointed officials to ministries like Defense, Judiciary, Information and Political Affairs, and others. Obviously, this is a symbolic move because governments in northern Pakistan still remain very much in control. But the TTP made its intentions pretty clear. It is openly challenging Islamabad and Rawalpindi. It is issuing death threats. Earlier this month, the TTP released a statement. It threatened Pakistan's top leadership. It named Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto Zardari. Allow me to quote from that statement. If these 2 parties remain firm on their position, then action will be taken against the leaders of these parties. People should avoid going near them. This is being seen as a death threat. Pakistan security forces are on notice from a beast of their own creation, and this is just one front. There's another one in Gilgit-Baltistan, that is in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. A major protest is on there, and this too could reignite calls for independence. Now look at these images. These protesters are talking about the Kargil-Skardu road. It links Pakistan's Gilgit-Baltistan with India's Ladakh, but the road remains closed. These protesters want it reopened. Some reports say they want to be reunited with their fellow Baltis in Ladakh. Baltis are the people of Baltistan. They're disenchanted with Pakistan. They're suffering on multiple counts: skyrocketing power bills, tax hikes, land grabs, growing shortage of essentials. Pakistan is facing what we call the perfect storm. On one hand, the TTP threatens to take control of territories in the north. On the other, Gilgit-Baltistan is on the boil, and in the south, Balochistan wants to break free. The dire economic situation has alienated the masses. The economy is sinking. The terror policies are backfiring. As India celebrates its 74th Republic Day, Pakistan is struggling to keep the country together. And now let me show you some recent headlines from Britain. Coal power stations fired up. Customers paid to cut energy use. UK faces worst and longest recession in G7. Prince Harry details physical attack by brother William in new book. Do you see what they're dealing with? A power crisis, a recession, and endless drama in the royal family. And yet, when their national broadcaster, the BBC, chooses to make a documentary, this is the subject they pick. India, the Modi Question, that is the title. It talks about India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. This documentary has triggered sharp reactions. I'm sure you've heard about it. Many of you asked us to take this up on Vantage, and here we are. Let's begin with an introduction of the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation. It was launched in the year 1922 as a mouthpiece of Imperial Britain. It's a public service broadcaster. It runs on taxpayer money, and it operates under a royal charter. The last few years have been tough for the BBC. There's a cash crunch, job cuts, and a growing list of controversies. They lied to get an interview, that famous interview with Princess Diana, the one where she talked about her failed marriage to now King Charles. The BBC had to apologize for that interview, for deceiving Diana to get a scoop. And as we speak, the BBC chairman is being investigated. What for? Conflict of interest. Richard Sharp is the BBC chairman. He's said to have helped former Prime Minister Boris Johnson secure a loan worth $900,000. Sharp says there was no quid pro quo. And I won't get into the case. This was just to show you what an illustrious record they've had. Now to the documentary they've done. We haven't seen it, and we don't plan to, but it has made quite a splash. If the idea was to grab eyeballs and to trend, they have succeeded. But at what cost, we ask? The documentary purportedly talks about the 2002 Gujarat riots and implicates the Modi government. He was then Chief Minister of Gujarat, the state of Gujarat, in 2002. This documentary is the BBC's opinion piece. And here are the facts. The Gujarat riots were investigated by a Special Investigation Team, or SIT, appointed by the Supreme Court of India at a time when the Congress party was in power at the centre. Mr. Modi was at the centre of this probe. Like I said, he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat and he was given a clean chit. Let me rephrase that. A Supreme Court appointed team cleared Narendra Modi of all charges. This was in the year 2012, well before he became the Prime Minister of India. Last year, the Supreme Court scrutinized the report once again. A plea was filed, a 3-judge bench heard the arguments, and again they gave a clean chit. The judges had a simple question to answer. Were the riots the result of a larger conspiracy? Allow me to quote what the judgment said. The Special Investigation Team has not found any conspiracy. No material was discovered pointing towards any meeting of minds. The riots across the state had taken place spontaneously. India's highest court has said this, and I will not dwell on it anymore because none of this is news anymore. Only the BBC thinks it is, so they've dedicated a full show to it. And it has generated a response. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak was asked about it. He said he disagrees with the characterization.
Does the Prime Minister agree with his diplomats in the Foreign Office that Modi was directly responsible?
I'm not sure I agree at all with the characterisation that the honourable gentleman has put forward.
The US State Department was asked about it. It says it hasn't even heard about the documentary.
I'm not aware of this documentary that you point to, but what I will say broadly is that there are a number of elements that undergird the global strategic partnership that we have with our Indian partners. There are close political ties, there are economic ties, there are exceptionally deep people-to-people ties between the United States and India. But one of those additional elements are the values that we share.
Well, what about India's response? New Delhi decided to ban the documentary. Now, we're not sure how effective a ban is in this day and age and how advisable it is in any age. But a better way, we say, to counter this propaganda will be to set the record straight and reclaim the narrative, which is what we hope to do through this show. Meanwhile, if we may, here's a Republic Day gift from India for the BBC. A list of suggestions for the BBC for their upcoming documentaries. Number 1, the Kohinoor and the colonial loot. Number 2, an outdated monarchy and unhealthy obsession with the royals. Number 3, racism in 2023. We're waiting. And now to the war in Ukraine. The Russian invasion is about to enter its 12th month. And the course of the conflict could change dramatically in the days ahead. The West is putting its finger on the scale again. It's about to hand Ukraine a powerful war machine, battle tanks. Kiev is set to receive at least 105 tanks from its Western partners. And this move is being called a game changer, at least by the West.
Putin expected Europe and the United States to weaken our resolve. He expected our support for Ukraine to crumble with time. He was wrong. He was wrong. And he was wrong from the beginning, and he continues to be wrong. We are united. America's united, and so is the world.
First, let me tell you about the tanks. These are top-of-the-line NATO standard battle tanks. Ukraine has always wanted them, but its Western allies have resisted so far. They cited training and logistical hurdles. And of course, there were political ones. Some of the concerns were legit. The Ukrainian forces have never used these tanks, these battle tanks, before. Plus, some Western partners did not want to become party to the war more than they already had. And leading this pack was Germany. The same Germany that was ridiculed last year for offering just helmets and moral support to Ukraine. Germany was not sure of giving tanks, but now it's on board.
Wir werden der Ukraine auch Kampfpanzer.
We will also supply Leopard 2 battle tanks to Ukraine. That's the result of renewed intense consultations with our allies and international partners. I would like to underline that it was right, and that it is right that we didn't let ourselves be driven, and that we instead counted, and we will continue to count on close cooperation for such an issue.
Sondern dass wir auf diese enge Kooperation in einer solchen Angelegenheit setzen und sie auch fortsetzen.
We did not let ourselves be driven. That's German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and his attempt at face-saving. For weeks, Germany has been under pressure, especially from the United States. Last week, the US Secretary of Defense made an appeal. Lloyd Austin was in Germany. He met his counterparts from NATO, and this is what he told them.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a crucial moment. Russia is regrouping, recruiting, and trying to re-equip. This is not a moment to slow down. It's a time to dig deeper. The Ukrainian people are watching us. The Kremlin is watching us. And history is watching us. So we won't let up.
Germany was put in a spot. It had to play ball. So Ukraine is getting new tanks. But how will this change the war? To answer this, let me tell you a little more about the tanks. Ukraine is said to be getting 3 types of tanks: the American M1 Abrams, the German Leopard 2, and the British Challenger 2. All of them are way more powerful than Russian tanks. These are the Soviet-era T-72 tanks. They form the bulk of the Russian tank forces. They're used by the Ukrainians too. So both sides were fighting with the T-72s. You could say it was a level playing field of sorts. But now, with Kiev getting new toys, it will have the upper hand, or so it hopes. The Western tanks have greater mobility, more lethal firepower, and stronger armor. Western leaders are calling this transfer a game changer. Slight problem though. As of today, it's all on paper. Ukraine is not getting these tanks anytime soon. The American deliveries, for instance, could take months.
The Pentagon, I think, talked about this earlier today. There's no date certain on the calendar. I think what we're looking at is what's probably going to be many months before they're actually there.
So time is an issue. Another problem is the number of tanks. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky wants 300. He won't get even half as many. Reports say best case scenario, a little over 100 tanks. And experts say this will be too little, too late.
The numbers that the Americans are talking about are not going to be militarily significant in and of themselves. Right? A couple of dozen tanks are not going to reverse the battlefield outcome in Ukraine.
A couple of dozen tanks will not reverse the outcome, he says. Zelensky is pinning his hopes on this. He has asked for a speedy delivery. What about the Russian president? What is Vladimir Putin's response? Yesterday, he visited the University of Moscow, spoke to some students, but did not mention the tanks. His spokesperson, however, took on the West. Dmitry Peskov said the tanks sent to Ukraine will, quote-unquote, burn to ashes.
There are constant statements from European capitals and Washington that the sending of various weapon systems to Ukraine, including tanks, in no way signifies the involvement of these countries or alliances in the hostilities in Ukraine. We categorically disagree with this, and in Moscow, everything that the alliance and the capitals I mentioned are doing is seen as direct involvement in the conflict. We see that this is growing.
And Russia's military is doing the rest of the talking. They're intensifying the attacks. Kiev was struck today. Russia launched multiple missiles. They're keen to gain ground ahead of the first anniversary of this invasion. So tanks or no tanks, the war looks set to intensify. To the US now, which is facing a national security emergency. Thousands of people are being killed on roads, in schools, in shopping malls. Not at the hands of Al-Qaeda or ISIS terrorists, but at the hands of fellow Americans, empowered by their law to carry assault weapons. 3 weeks, 40 mass shootings and counting. The latest being in the Washington state, Welcome to America in 2023. Ohio, Florida, North Carolina, Texas, Utah, California, and all the other states marked in the red in this map have witnessed mass shootings in the month of January. This month. Gun terror in the US is now daily news. More than 45,000 people died due to gun-related injuries in 2020. For the last 2 years, they don't have complete data, but the trajectory is quite clear. Mass shootings have risen steadily since 2014 and sharply since 2020. Fun fact, the US is the only country in the world which has more guns than people. And these are civilian guns that we're talking about, not the military or the police. More civilian guns than civilians. They have 120 guns for every 100 people. And they have a law that allows all of this. It's called the Second Amendment of the US Constitution. The Second Amendment. It gives every American the right to carry arms, and around a third of America's adults say they carry arms. You see, guns are an emotive issue in the US, and gun control, a very contentious subject. Here's a familiar script. A mass shooting takes place, horror, shock, tears, and sound bites by politicians, both Republicans and Democrats. They condemn the incident, they offer their thoughts and prayers, and they move on until the next shooting. Why don't they stop this? After all, American leaders launch operations to fight terror in far-flung lands. Why don't they fight gun terror at home? Because politics and gun lobbies and big money. Connect the dots. After every mass shooting, political football begins. This month, after the killings in California, President Joe Biden spoke. He called on the Congress to ban assault weapons.
Yesterday, my buddy Dianne Feinstein introduced her Senate assault weapons ban. I am asking you all to send that to my desk as quickly as you can.
And this is where the big divide lies. Republicans believe the right to own a gun is a fundamental right.
But the existence of evil in our world is not a reason to disarm law-abiding citizens who know how to use their weapon and can protect a lot of people. The existence of evil is one of the very best reasons to arm law-abiding citizens.
So Republicans resist and Democrats pass the buck. The fact is, the president can use emergency powers to push for reform. For instance, he can declare gun violence a public health emergency. And this is an emergency. Such a declaration of a public health emergency would then give him additional statutory powers. So to say that his hands are tied does not cut it anymore. In June last year, a new law was signed. It had bipartisan support, meaning leaders from both sides, both parties, backed this law. It was hailed as the most significant gun legislation in 3 decades in America. It was, in fact, a compromise law. And it hasn't fixed very much. More than 400 shootings have taken place since the law was passed. More than 450 deaths have been reported since this law was passed. Again, why hasn't the US been able to fix this? When they want to bomb another country, they don't even wait for a United Nations resolution. When they want to fight dictators or bring democracy or liberate people from the shackles of tyrants, they go to any lengths and use all their might. Why can't they liberate their own people from gun terror? Because American lawmakers are losing to the NRA, the National Rifle Association. It is the largest gun owners' group in the US, and not surprisingly, it lobbies against gun control laws. It doesn't want gun control. Another fun fact, when this same association invited former President Donald Trump to speak at their annual leadership forum last year, guess what they banned? Guns. That conference was held in Houston, and it was held just days after a mass shooting at an elementary school in Texas. You know how many children died there? 19, plus 2 teachers. 19 children shot dead in a school. It is supposed to be the safest place for a child after home. In the US, evidently not. In American schools, shootings and guns have become par for the course. And the National Rifle Association shoots down any attempts to fix this. Just how powerful is this group? It was founded in 1871 by two Civil War veterans. In a few decades, it began influencing government policies. It started funding lawmakers. The NRA spends around $3 million every year just to influence gun policy. In 2020, it spent around $250 million on lobbying and related activities. So you get the picture. Money talks as guns kill. The NRA's justification defies logic. It says guns make America safe. The fact is, the US is the only country in the world where you're more likely to be killed by a teenager than a terrorist. While it's busy posturing as a defender of human rights in the world, it has failed miserably to protect innocent lives at home. More than 6,000 children were either killed or injured by guns in 2022. 6,000 children. The youngest victim was a 5-month-old. Shot dead at 5 months. And this mayhem will not stop. Because America's leaders are busy looking away and trying to tell other countries what they must fix. And now it's time to say goodbye. But before we do that, let's give a shout out to some friends of India. Various embassies wished India today in the most creative of ways. Israel celebrated India's cultural diversity with wishes in our regional languages. The Israeli Consul General played our national anthem on the piano. The Danish ambassador sent wishes from an electric auto rickshaw. The US gave a soulful rendition of our national song, Vande Mataram. We're leaving you with these images. And don't forget to write to us. Tell us what you like, what you'd like us to do better or differently. We're waiting for your feedback.
Now I've jumped into my favorite car. This is an e-rickshaw, and it shows that India is not only blue, it's green, and we are moving into the future. So my dear friend, please move. It's all about being green. Dhanyavad.
Vande Mataram, 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 Vande Mataram. Sujalam Subhalam Malayaj Shitalam Shasya Shamala Mataram Vande. Sujalam Subhalam Malayaj Shitalam Shasya Shamala Mataram Vande. Vande Mataram, 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 Vande Mataram.